the alien queen. Wanted blood? Until I touched her heart instead. The sacrifice's gambit, the holding cell smelled like burnt ozone and broken dreams. Jackson Reed sat slumped against the crystalline wall, watching droplets of some unknown fluid leak from the ceiling vent above. Each droplet hit the floor with a soft plink that echoed through the chamber like a countdown timer to his inevitable doom. Well, he muttered to himself, this is definitely not how I imagined my comedy tour of the galaxy would end. 3 months ago, he'd been Jackson Reed, failed stand-up comedian from New Brooklyn, scraping together credits for rent by performing at dive bars on backwater space stations. Now he was Jackson Reed, diplomatic prisoner and unwilling sacrifice to the most feared ruler in the Outer Rim. The irony wasn't lost on him that his biggest audience was about to be his last. The massive door slid open with a hiss that sounded suspiciously like laughter. 2 Zephyrian guards entered, their obsidian armor gleaming under the harsh lights. They moved with predatory grace, their elongated limbs and silver-streaked skin marking them as members of the warrior caste. The larger one gestured with a weapon that looked like it could disintegrate him and everything behind him for several miles. "Time to go, Earthling," the guard rumbled in accented standard. "Her Majesty awaits." Jackson stood slowly, his joints protesting after days of confinement. "You know, back home we usually send a car service for this kind of thing. Maybe some champagne in the back seat. You folks really need to work on your customer service." Guards exchanged glances. The smaller one tilted his head. "You make jokes before death?" "It's kind of my thing," Jackson replied, straightening his torn shirt. "Though I have to say the material practically writes itself here. So I walk into an alien execution chamber." They marched him through corridors that seemed designed by someone with a passion for intimidation and a serious budget for dramatic lighting. The walls pulsed with veins of red energy, and the air hummed with power that made his teeth ache. Every step brought them closer to the throne room, and every step made Jackson's heart pound a little faster despite his outward calm. Other aliens they passed stared at him with mixtures of curiosity and hunger. A reptilian dignitary actually licked his lips and rubbed his belly. A tentacled creature whispered something that made its companion laugh in a sound like breaking glass. "Popular guy," Jackson observed. "Do I sign autographs before or after the main event?" "Silence," the larger guard commanded, but there was something almost amused in his tone. The throne room doors were massive slabs of black stone carved with scenes of conquest and consumption. They opened to reveal a chamber that could have housed a small city. The ceiling stretched up into shadows, supported by pillars that looked suspiciously like fossilized bones. At the far end, elevated on a dais of steps that seemed to go on forever, sat the Crimson Throne, and on it sat Queen Vexara. Jackson had seen the holovids, of course. Everyone in the galaxy had heard of the Blood Queen of Zephyr Prime, the cannibal empress who had conquered 17 star systems and added their rulers to her dinner menu. But seeing her in person was something else entirely. She was beautiful in the way a supernova was beautiful. Magnificent, terrifying, and potentially fatal to observe too closely. Her skin had the deep purple hue of Zephyrian royalty, marked with silver tattoos that seemed to move in the light. Her hair fell in waves of midnight black, and her eyes were the color of fresh blood, glowing with an inner fire that spoke of power beyond mortal comprehension. She wore armor that looked like it had been forged from liquid rubies, form-fitting and practical yet undeniably regal. A cape of what looked like starlight fell from her shoulders, and on her head sat a crown of twisted metal that seemed to whisper promises of violence. But it was her expression that caught Jackson off guard. He'd expected cruelty, hunger, perhaps amusement at his fear. Instead, he saw something else entirely. Boredom. Here was a woman who had seen everything, conquered everything, tasted everything. Here was someone going through the motions of being a monster because it was expected of her. The guards forced him to his knees at the base of the steps. The assembled court, dozens of alien dignitaries, warriors, and nobles, watched in anticipation. Somewhere in the crowd, someone was taking bets. Queen Vexara rose from her throne with liquid grace. Each step down the dais echoed through the chamber like a funeral drum. When she reached him, she stopped just close enough that he could smell her perfume, something exotic that reminded him of night-blooming flowers and distant storms. "Jackson Reed of Earth," she said, her voice carrying the weight of authority that came from being obeyed without question. "You stand accused of diplomatic interference, cultural contamination, and aggravated comedy in the 3rd degree." Aggravated comedy? Jackson looked up at her, grinning despite himself. "Is that even a real crime? Because if it is, I've got some notes about my college roommates' open mic nights." A ripple of gasps went through the assembled crowd. Apparently, condemned prisoners weren't supposed to crack jokes. Who knew? Vexara tilted her head, studying him like he was a particularly interesting specimen. "Do you understand why you are here, human?" "Well, according to your diplomatic corps, I'm here because I told a joke about Zephyrian mating rituals that was apparently considered an act of war. Personally, I think your people need to work on your sense of humor, but what do I know? I'm just the guy about to become lunch." "You are not concerned about your fate?" Jackson shrugged. "I mean, I'd prefer not to be eaten, obviously, but if I'm going to go out, at least it's in front of a crowd. Do you know how hard it is to pack a room these days?" For the first time in centuries, Queen Vexara found herself genuinely surprised. Prisoners usually groveled, pleaded, or tried to bargain for their lives. They didn't make small talk and critique her entertainment industry. "You are unusual," she said finally. "That's what my last girlfriend said, right before she broke up with me for a guy who owned a pizza franchise. Apparently, financial stability is more attractive than a killer 5-minute set about the absurdity of space travel." Vexara's lips twitched. It might have been the beginning of a smile. "And you believe humor will save you?" "Probably not," Jackson admitted. "But if I'm going to die, I might as well die being myself. Besides, you look like you could use a laugh. When's the last time someone told you a joke that wasn't about how terrifying you are?" The question hit her like a physical blow. When was the last time? Centuries? Millennia? When was the last time someone had looked at her and seen anything other than a monster to be feared or a conquest to be attempted? "You would dare to pity me?" she asked, her voice dangerous. "Not pity," Jackson said quickly. "Recognize. You're not just the Blood Queen, are you? You're brilliant, you're powerful, you've built an empire that spans star systems. But when's the last time someone appreciated your mind instead of just being afraid of your appetite?" The throne room fell silent. Even the whispered betting stopped. Vexara stared down at him for a long moment, her red eyes unreadable. Then she did something that shocked everyone present, including herself. She laughed. It started as a low chuckle, then grew into something rich and genuine, the laugh of someone who had forgotten what it felt like to be surprised. The sound echoed through the chamber like music, beautiful and terrible, and utterly unexpected. When the laughter faded, she looked down at him with something new in her eyes, not hunger, not boredom, interest. "What is your name, comedian?" "Jackson Reed, Your Majesty. And if it helps, I've got about 20 minutes of material about the absurdity of interspecies dating." "Rise," she commanded. Jackson got to his feet, brushing dust from his knees. The guards looked confused, unsure whether they should still be, pointing weapons at him. Vexara turned to address her court, her voice ringing with authority. "This human has proven himself worthy of interest. I claim him not as prey." She paused, looking back at Jackson with that same unreadable expression. "But as consort." The reaction was immediate and explosive. Shouts of outrage, gasps of disbelief, the sound of several courtiers fainting. Somewhere in the crowd, someone dropped their betting tablet. Jackson blinked. "I'm sorry, did you just say consort? Because I should probably mention I have student loans back on Earth that—" "Silence," Vexara said. But there was amusement in her tone. She extended her hand to him. "Do you accept, Jackson Reed of Earth?" He looked at her hand. Elegant, deadly, offering him a life he couldn't have imagined in his wildest dreams or nightmares. Then he looked at her face, seeing past the fearsome reputation to the woman beneath who had laughed at his jokes. Well, he said, taking her hand, it beats being eaten. Her fingers were warm, and when she smiled, it was like watching a star being born. The heart beneath the crown. 3 weeks into his new life as royal consort, Jackson Reed had learned several important things about alien palace living. First, everything was designed to be intimidating, including the bathroom fixtures. Second, the food was actually quite good once you got past the fact that some of it was still moving. And third, being the boyfriend of the galaxy's most feared ruler came with a surprisingly steep learning curve. Your stance is all wrong, Commander Thane growled, circling him like a predator sizing up wounded prey. The Zephyrian general stood, nearly 8 feet tall, his silver-streaked skin marked with battle scars that told stories of 100 conquered worlds. You hold the blade like you're stirring soup. Jackson adjusted his grip on the training sword, trying not to wince as his bruised ribs protested. Well, to be fair, I have stirred a lot of soup. It's a surprisingly transferable skill. Thane's 4 eyes narrowed. Your jokes will not save you when assassins come in the night. They might, Jackson replied, dodging a practice swing that would have taken his head off. Ever try to stab someone while you're laughing? It throws off your aim. The general's expression suggested he was considering testing that theory immediately. Training sessions had become a daily ritual, much to Jackson's dismay and the entertainment of various palace staff who had taken to gathering to watch the human get systematically beaten by alien weapons masters. Queen Vexara had insisted on it after the 3rd assassination attempt in 2 weeks. The old bloodlines will not accept you easily, she had explained over dinner the night before, delicately cutting into something that looked suspiciously like it had tentacles. They see my choice as weakness, a crack in the Empire's foundation. You must prove yourself worthy, or they will remove you from the equation permanently. And by remove you mean death. Probably painful, possibly creative. She had said it with the same tone most people used to discuss the weather. Now, as Thane advanced with 2 curved blades that hummed with energy, Jackson wondered if maybe he should have stuck with the original execution plan. It would have been quicker. Focus, Thane commanded. Your mind wanders. It's called multitasking, Jackson panted, barely parrying a strike that would have carved him like a holiday roast. I'm fighting and contemplating my life choices simultaneously. Your life choices brought you to my blade. Perhaps contemplate better ones. Despite the death threats and casual violence, Jackson had grown to appreciate the commander. Thane was brutally honest, fiercely loyal to Vexara, and possessed a dry sense of humor that he tried very hard to hide. He also happened to be one of the few beings in the palace who didn't actively want to eat Jackson. The training session ended with Jackson flat on his back, staring up at the ceiling while Thane stood over him shaking his head. Improvement, the general admitted grudgingly. Yesterday you lasted 30 seconds. Today, nearly a full minute. Progress, Jackson wheezed. At this rate, I'll be almost competent by the time I'm 90. You will not live to 90 if you do not take this seriously. Thane extended a clawed hand to help him up. The Queen chose you for reasons I do not understand, but she chose you. Do not make her regret it. Later that evening, Jackson found Vexara in her private chambers, seated at a desk covered with holographic displays showing star charts, troop movements, and what looked like economic reports. She had traded her ceremonial armor for a simple black dress that somehow made her look more regal than any crown could. Busy day conquering the galaxy? He asked, settling into the chair across from her. Always, she replied without looking up. 3 rebellions in the outer systems, a trade dispute with the Corellian Consortium, and Ambassador Lyra has requested another private audience to discuss matters of mutual interest. Jackson had met Ambassador Lyra the week before, a stunning, Altarian diplomat with silver skin and eyes like liquid mercury. She had smiled too much, complimented Vexara's wisdom too effusively, and looked at Jackson like he was something unpleasant she'd scraped off her shoe. Let me guess, Jackson said. These matters involve suggesting you'd be better off with a more traditional consort. Vexara's lips curved in what might have been amusement. Among other things, she believes I have grown soft, that my choice to spare you indicates weakness that my enemies will exploit. And what do you think? For the first time that evening, she looked up from her work. Her red eyes studied his face with an intensity that made him feel exposed, as if she could read every thought in his head. I think, she said slowly, that for the first time in 3 centuries, someone looks at me and sees more than a monster or a conquest. Do you know what that is worth, Jackson Reed? Before he could answer, alarms began blaring throughout the palace. The lights shifted to emergency red and Vexara was on her feet instantly, her diplomatic persona melting away to reveal the warrior queen beneath. What? Jackson began. Attack, she said simply, already moving toward a hidden panel in the wall that opened to reveal an arsenal that would make a military depot jealous. They moved faster than anticipated. The door burst open and Commander Thane rushed in, his armor scorched and his expression grim. My queen, we are under assault. 3 factions have coordinated their attack. The Crimson Talon, the Old Blood, Coalition, and, he hesitated, and Ambassador Lyra's forces. They have taken the East Wing and are advancing on the throne room. Their leader demands your surrender and the humans' immediate execution. Vexara selected a weapon that looked like it could level a city block. How many? 200 warriors, maybe more. They knew our defenses, our patrol patterns. This was planned. Jackson felt his stomach drop. So this is about me. They're doing this because you chose me. No, Vexara said, turning to face him. They are doing this because they fear change. You are simply the catalyst. Great. I'm a catalyst for civil war. That's definitely going on my resume. Despite everything, she almost smiled. Stay here. Thane will protect you. Actually, Jackson said, an idea forming in his mind. I have a better plan. Both aliens stared at him. Trust me, he continued. I know I'm not a warrior, and I definitely can't fight my way out of this, but I am a performer. And sometimes the best way to win a fight is to change the rules entirely. 10 minutes later, Jackson stood in the center of the throne room, hands raised in surrender, facing a crowd of heavily armed rebels. Their leader, a scarred Zephyrian warlord named Corax, held a plasma cannon aimed directly at his chest. The human comes willingly to his death, Corax announced to his followers. Perhaps he is not entirely without honor. Actually, Jackson said, conversationally, I'm here to make you an offer. Laughter rippled through the rebel ranks. Ambassador Lyra, resplendent in battle armor that looked like it had been designed by a particularly violent fashion designer, stepped forward. The prey thinks to negotiate. She purred. How amusing. Not negotiate, Jackson corrected. Educate. See, you all think I'm the problem, the weak human who corrupted your strong queen, but you're wrong about something fundamental. Silence him, Corax growled. I didn't change her, Jackson continued, his voice carrying through the chamber. She was always this person, always this brilliant, strategic, powerful leader. The only thing I did was give her permission to be more than just the monster you needed her to be. Lies, Ambassador Lyra snapped. She has grown weak, distracted by your alien charms. Really? Then explain how she knew you were coming. The rebels exchanged uncertain glances. Jackson grinned. Did you really think you could plan a rebellion against the woman who conquered 17 star systems without her finding out? She's been 3 steps ahead of you since the moment you started plotting. As if summoned by his words, the throne room doors exploded inward. Queen Vexara strode through the smoke and debris, flanked by her elite guard. But she wasn't wearing armor. She was dressed in the flowing black gown she'd worn in her chambers, looking for all the world like she was attending a dinner party rather than crushing a rebellion. Corax, she said pleasantly. Lyra, how kind of you to gather all my enemies in one convenient location. The rebels raised their weapons, but it was too late. The palace guards had surrounded them, emerging from hidden passages and defensive positions. The rebellion was over before it had truly begun. Impossible, Corax snarled. Our intelligence was perfect. Our timing was exactly what I wanted it to be, Vexara finished. Did you truly believe I didn't know about your meetings, your plans? I have been queen for 300 years. I did not maintain power by being careless. She walked slowly through the crowd of defeated rebels, her presence commanding absolute attention. When she reached Jackson, she placed a hand on his shoulder. My consort suggested a different approach to dealing with traitors, she announced. Rather than execution, you will be exiled to the mining colonies of Kepler-7. There you will have ample time to contemplate the wisdom of challenging the crown. It was a mercy none of them had expected, and Jackson could see the confusion in their faces. However, Vexara continued, her voice hardening, should any of you ever threaten him again, I will demonstrate why my reputation for creative violence is well-deserved. As the rebels were led away, Ambassador Lyra broke free from her captors and lunged toward Jackson with a concealed blade. She never reached him. Vexara moved like liquid lightning, catching the ambassador's wrist and twisting until the weapon clattered to the floor. That, she said softly, was a mistake. Later, as they stood on the palace balcony watching the last of the rebel ships depart under heavy escort, Vexara leaned against the railing beside him. Your plan worked, she said. It was a gamble, Jackson admitted. I figured if you were half as smart as I thought you were, you'd already know about the rebellion. And if you were half as tactical as your reputation suggested, you'd let them make the first move so you could end it decisively. And if you had been wrong, well, then I'd be dead, and you'd be dealing with a civil war. But hey, at least, I'd have gone out with style. She was quiet for a long moment, watching the twin moons rise over her empire. Why? She asked finally. Why what? Why stay? Why risk your life for someone you barely know? You could have fled during the attack. Could have sought asylum with any number of my enemies. Instead, you chose to stand with me. Jackson considered the question seriously. Because, he said finally, underneath all that armor and attitude, you're just someone who's been alone for way too long, and I know what that feels like. She turned to look at him, her red eyes reflecting the moonlight. And now? Now you're not alone anymore. Neither am I, for that matter. When she kissed him, it was soft and gentle and nothing like what he'd expected from the Blood Queen of Zephyr Prime. It was the kiss of a woman who had forgotten what it felt like to be vulnerable, choosing to trust someone with her heart. When they broke apart, she rested her forehead against his. The Empire will talk, she murmured. They will say their queen has grown soft. Let them talk, Jackson replied. We both know the truth. You're not soft. You're complete. There's a difference. And as they stood together under the alien stars, the most feared ruler in the galaxy allowed herself to smile, not the predatory grin her enemies knew, but something genuine and warm and utterly human. For the first time in centuries, Queen Vexara was home,